The tragic culmination of escalating threats and systemic failures unfolded on November 16, 2022, at Corneisha Butler's home in Atlanta. Despite having a restraining order in place against her ex-girlfriend, Shakia Perkins, Cornisha's sense of security proved to be a devastating illusion. On that fateful day, Shakia Perkins, defying the legal boundaries set by the restraining order, made her way to Cornisha's residence. The exact means of her entry remain a chilling detail, highlighting the inadequacy of the protective order in physically preventing Shakia from reaching Cornisha. Whether through forced entry or by exploiting a moment of vulnerability, Shakia gained access to the home that Cornisha had worked so hard to create, the sanctuary where her children resided. Inside the house, a confrontation of some kind undoubtedly occurred. The details of this encounter are likely pieced together through forensic evidence, potential witness testimonies, if anyone else was present or heard anything, and perhaps even later statements made by Shakia. However, the end result was a brutal and irreversible act of violence. Shakia Perkins, fueled by a history of possessiveness, jealousy, and escalating threats, ultimately shot and killed Corneisha Butler within the confines of her own home. Adding an unbearable layer of tragedy to this horrific event was the presence of Corneisha's 2-year-old child in the home at the time of the murder. This detail underscores the profound violation of safety and the lasting trauma inflicted not only on Corneisha but also on her innocent children who were witnesses to this ultimate act of violence. The image of a young child being present during such a brutal crime is a stark reminder of the far-reaching devastation of domestic violence. Following the shooting, the scene inside Corneisha's home would have been one of chaos and despair. The sounds of the violence, the immediate aftermath, and the eventual arrival of law enforcement painted a grim picture of the final moments of Corneisha's life. The once vibrant home, a symbol of her success and a haven for her children, became the site of unimaginable tragedy. The swift response of law enforcement led to the apprehension of Shakia Perkins, who was subsequently charged with first-degree murder. The arrest marked the beginning of the legal proceedings, but it could not undo the irreparable loss suffered by Corneisha's family, friends, and community. Corneisha's murder serves as a stark and brutal illustration of the lethal potential of domestic violence and the catastrophic consequences when protective measures fail to prevent a determined abuser from inflicting harm. It underscores the urgent need for more effective systems to safeguard victims and hold perpetrators accountable. Born and raised in Memphis, her decision to relocate to Atlanta was driven by a powerful desire for growth and opportunity, a testament to her ambition and proactive nature. Atlanta, a city known for its vibrant culture and economic prospects, became the canvas upon which Corneisha sought to build a brighter future for herself and her children. Her success in Atlanta was remarkable. Through hard work and dedication, she established herself as both a skilled tax preparer and a talented esthetician. These dual careers highlight her versatility and entrepreneurial spirit. As a tax preparer, she demonstrated a keen eye for detail and a commitment to helping others navigate complex financial matters. In the realm of aesthetics, she likely possessed an artistic flair and a passion for enhancing the well-being and confidence of her clients. Her professional achievements were not merely about financial gain. They were a reflection of her drive to create a stable and prosperous environment for her 4 children, who were the center of her world. Beyond her professional life, Corneisha was a devoted mother. Her love for her children permeated every aspect of her being. She worked tirelessly to provide for them, nurturing their growth and creating a loving home. The acquisition of a 5-bedroom house in Atlanta was a significant milestone, a tangible symbol of her success and her commitment to providing her children with a comfortable and secure upbringing. This home was not just a physical structure. It was a space filled with the laughter and love of a family that Corneisha had single-handedly strived to build and protect. Corneisha Butler's relocation to Atlanta was a pivotal step in her pursuit of a better life for herself and her 4 children. Establishing roots in the vibrant city, she channeled her drive and entrepreneurial spirit into building a successful career. Her proficiency as a tax preparer allowed her to assist numerous individuals with their financial needs, demonstrating her sharp intellect and dedication. Simultaneously, she cultivated a passion for aesthetics, building a clientele who valued her skills and artistry in enhancing their well-being and confidence. These two thriving careers were a testament to her versatility and unwavering work ethic. The tangible manifestation of her success was the 5-bedroom house she acquired in Atlanta. This home was more than just a dwelling. It was a symbol of her hard-won achievements and the secure environment she was determined to create for her children. It represented stability, a haven built through her own efforts. Cornisha's life revolved around her children, who were the central focus of her love and endeavors. She poured her energy into nurturing them, providing for their needs, and creating a home filled with warmth and care. Her friends and family remember her as a vibrant and determined woman, full of life and deeply committed to her role as a mother. She had built a promising future for herself and her children in Atlanta, a future tragically cut short by the violence she sought protection from. Corneisha Butler's 6-year relationship with Shakia Perkins, initially perhaps holding the promise of companionship, gradually devolved into a cycle of escalating abuse that ultimately cost Corneisha her life. What may have begun as a seemingly normal connection slowly revealed its darker undercurrents, characterized by Shakia's increasingly controlling and volatile behavior. Over time, the relationship became a source of constant fear and anxiety for Corneisha, marked by possessiveness, jealousy, property destruction, physical violence, and terrifying death threats. The possessiveness exhibited by Shakia manifested as an unhealthy obsession with Cornisha's life and interactions. Shakia displayed an unwarranted need to control Cornisha's movements, her communication with others, and her personal relationships. This often involved intense scrutiny of Cornisha's phone, social media, and even her interactions with friends, family, and colleagues. Any perceived independence or connection outside of their relationship would be met with suspicion and accusations, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance and stifling Cornisha's autonomy. Closely intertwined with possessiveness was Shakia's extreme jealousy. This jealousy was often irrational and easily triggered, even by innocent interactions. Shakia would become enraged by Cornisha speaking to others, regardless of the context, leading to heated arguments and accusations of infidelity or disloyalty. This constant suspicion eroded trust within the relationship and forced Cornisha to constantly navigate Shakia's volatile emotions, often isolating her from her support network in an attempt to avoid conflict. As the relationship deteriorated further, Shakia's emotional instability began to manifest in destructive behaviors. Property destruction became a recurring tactic of intimidation and control. During arguments or fits of rage, Shakia would damage Cornisha's belongings, potentially breaking furniture, smashing personal items, or vandalizing her property. These acts served not only as a release for Shakia's anger but also as a means of asserting power and control over Cornisha, creating a climate of fear and instability within their shared space or Cornisha's own home. The destruction of personal items, often holding sentimental value, was a deliberate violation of Cornisha's sense of security and well-being. The abuse tragically escalated beyond emotional manipulation and property damage to physical violence. Shakia subjected Cornisha to physical assaults, the nature and severity of which likely varied but consistently placed Cornisha in danger. These acts of violence were a stark demonstration of Shakia's willingness to inflict harm and served to establish dominance and control through fear. Each instance of physical violence would have left Cornisha feeling increasingly vulnerable and trapped within the relationship, further eroding her self-esteem and sense of safety. The final and most terrifying stage of the abuse involved explicit death threats. During moments of intense anger and aggression, Shakia threatened to take Cornisha's life. These were not just empty words, they were pronouncements of the ultimate form of control and violence. The knowledge that her own life was in danger created an unbearable level of fear and psychological trauma for Cornisha. These threats were a clear indication of the lethal potential of Shakia's rage and should have served as a critical red flag, highlighting the imminent danger Cornisha faced. The 6-year relationship was thus a descent into terror for Cornisha, marked by a consistent pattern of escalating abuse. Shakia's possessiveness and jealousy led to controlling behaviors, which then manifested in the destruction of Cornisha's property. This eventually gave way to physical violence, culminating in the ultimate and most horrifying form of control, explicit threats to end Cornisha's life. This history of escalating abuse, documented by Cornisha's attempts to seek legal protection, tragically foreshadowed the fatal outcome, highlighting the urgent need for effective intervention in such dangerous situations. The tragic death of Corneisha Butler serves as a stark indictment of the failures within the legal system that were meant to protect her. Despite her proactive efforts to seek help and establish legal boundaries against Shakia Perkins's escalating abuse, the system repeatedly faltered, ultimately leaving her vulnerable to the very danger she sought to escape. The documented history of Shakia's violence, including multiple domestic violence cases, should have triggered a more robust and protective response, yet a series of systemic weaknesses allowed Shakia to remain a persistent threat. One of the most glaring failures was the repeated release of Shakia Perkins on bail, despite her demonstrated history of violent behavior and multiple encounters with the legal system related to domestic violence. Bail, intended to ensure an individual's appearance in court, became a revolving door for Shakia. Each release, despite the clear and present danger she posed to Cornisha, allowed her to continue her pattern of abuse, escalating the threats and ultimately leading to the fatal act. This repeated granting of bail suggests a potential underestimation of the severity of domestic violence cases and a failure to adequately prioritize the safety of the victim. The legal system seemed unable or unwilling to recognize the pattern of escalating danger and incapacitate Shakia before her threats became a reality. Adding to this failure was the reported inconsistent police response to Cornisha's calls for help. When victims of domestic violence reach out to law enforcement, it is often a moment of immense courage and a desperate plea for safety. However, if these calls are not met with a consistent, thorough, and victim-centered approach, it can erode trust in the system and leave the victim feeling even more isolated and vulnerable. Inconsistent responses might include delays in arrival, a failure to fully investigate the situation, or a lack of follow-up, potentially downplaying the seriousness of the threats and the immediate danger faced by Cornisha. This inconsistency can stem from a lack of adequate training in handling domestic violence cases, understaffing, or a failure to recognize the escalating nature of abuse. Each instance of a perceived inadequate response would have further isolated Cornisha and emboldened her abuser. Perhaps the most tragically evident failure was the ineffectiveness of the restraining order Cornisha obtained against Shakia. Restraining orders are intended to provide a legal shield, prohibiting an abuser from contacting or coming near the victim. However, as Cornisha's case chillingly illustrates, a piece of paper alone cannot physically prevent a determined abuser from violating its terms. The fact that Shakia was able to disregard the restraining order and gain access to Cornisha's home to commit the murder highlights the limitations of such legal instruments without robust enforcement mechanisms. The system failed to adequately monitor and enforce the restraining order, leaving Cornisha with a false sense of security and ultimately unable to prevent the fatal confrontation. These failures are not isolated incidents but rather symptoms of deeper systemic issues within the handling of domestic violence cases. One contributing factor can be a societal underestimation of the lethality of domestic abuse. It is often viewed as a private matter or a lover's quarrel, rather than the serious and potentially fatal crime that it is. This can lead to a lack of urgency in response from law enforcement and the courts. Another issue is the lack of adequate resources and training for law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and judges in understanding the dynamics of domestic violence, including the patterns of abuse and the high risk of escalation. Without this specialized knowledge, the severity of the situation may be misjudged, leading to decisions like the repeated granting of bail or an insufficient response to calls for help. Furthermore, the burden often falls heavily on the victim to repeatedly report abuse and navigate a complex legal system while simultaneously trying to ensure their own safety. This can be emotionally and practically overwhelming, especially when the system itself appears unresponsive or ineffective. The case of Corneisha Butler tragically underscores the urgent need for systemic reforms to better protect victims of domestic violence. This includes a more rigorous assessment of risk in domestic violence cases, A stricter approach to bail for individuals with a history of abuse, consistent and well-trained law enforcement responses, and more effective mechanisms for enforcing protective orders. The lessons from Cornisha's story must serve as a catalyst for change, ensuring that the legal system truly acts as a shield for those who are most vulnerable.
The City of South Fulton Police Chief says his officers did their job bringing 4 domestic violence type cases against one woman last year who got bond. And now the department has arrested her for murder. Same victim. Should Corneisha Butler still be alive today?
You know, I would think so.
But for a bail bond and perhaps a fatally flawed personal decision, murder victim Corneisha Butler might still be alive, says City of South Fulton Police Chief Keith Meadows.
We've been in this business long enough to know that violent behavior is progressive.
A City of South Fulton Police Lieutenant says Shakia Perkins has been charged with the murder of Corneisha Perkins November 16th and more. He confirms the victim was also known as Corneisha Butler, a mother of 4, the suspect's wife, that the couple had been estranged but reunited. But records indicate that's not the first time Shakia Perkins has been charged with crimes victimizing Ms. Butler. That in October of 2021, a judge ordered bond totaling $70,000 for Shakia Perkins on charges of aggravated assault, criminal damage to property, terroristic threats, felony, and arson first degree. Conditions including must not come within 200 yards of victim.
We would not want to see an individual get out on such a low bond given the history between these 2 individuals.
September 13th, 2021, a City of South Fulton police report contains allegations suggesting Shakia Perkins used her car to hit Ms. Butler's, attempting to push her off the road, then struck Ms. Butler's car again. The report indicates they were separated at the time. September 15th, 2021, a City of South Fulton incident report says Ms. Butler advised that Ms. Perkins advised she would come to her house to see if she had company. Ms. Butler advised that Ms. Perkins arrived and kicked in her door, cracking the frame. A South Fulton police lieutenant says September 25th, 2021, Shakia Perkins allegedly set a fire that engulfed 2 of Ms. Butler's vehicles and damaged her house as well. South Fulton Police Chief Keith Meadows says Ms. Butler showed police screenshots in which Shakia Perkins allegedly texted, quote, "Soon you will be dead, and I'll be in jail, and that's fine," unquote. And, quote, "I'm going for first degree, not second degree. Stamp that."
You feel like you as police did your job, but the court system let you down?
We do. We see one case after another where, the victim actually reached out to us and we responded appropriately.
A statement attributed to Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis says, "My office opposed bond in this case. Cases involving domestic violence often involve ongoing danger to the victim. We urge judges hearing bond requests in domestic violence cases to carefully consider the potential danger to victims and either hold defendants in jail without bond or, at a minimum, impose monitoring requirements on them that will ensure they cannot approach their victims without law enforcement being notified."
When you see time and time again, people are let out on these sort of crimes and they ultimately result in murder, there's a breakdown somewhere.
A public defender spokesperson emailed the Office of the Fulton County Public Defender represents Ms. Perkins in the 2021 and November 2022 cases. Defender attorneys are thoroughly investigating the circumstances surrounding the allegations, providing Ms. Perkins zealous, effective, and timely representation. The serious nature of the charges precludes further comment at this point in time.
November 16th, 2022, stands as a day of unimaginable horror, the culmination of a tragically predictable pattern of escalating abuse that the system failed to prevent. On this fateful day, Shakia Perkins, in blatant disregard for the restraining order that was meant to keep her away, invaded the supposed sanctuary of Corneisha Butler's Atlanta home. The violation of this protective order was not just a legal transgression. It was a terrifying intrusion into the one place where Cornisha should have felt safe. The exact sequence of events that unfolded inside the house remains a chilling void, filled only by the devastating outcome. What is known is that Shakia, having gained access to Cornisha's residence, confronted her. The nature of this confrontation, whether it involved further threats, arguments, or an immediate assault, is unclear. However, the end result was a final, brutal act of violence. In an ultimate display of lethal control, Shakia Perkins fatally shot Corneisha Butler within the walls of her own home. The sound of the gunshot shattered the peace of the residence, marking the irreversible end of Cornisha's life and the shattering of her family's world. Adding an unspeakable layer of tragedy to this horrific crime was the presence of Cornisha's 2-year-old child within the home at the very moment of the murder. This innocent witness to such a brutal act underscores the profound and far-reaching trauma inflicted by domestic violence. The psychological impact on a young child forced to experience such violence is immeasurable, leaving scars that can last a lifetime. The presence of the child transforms the narrative from a singular act of violence against Cornisha to a crime that irrevocably damaged an entire family unit, robbing the surviving children of their mother and exposing them to unimaginable horror. The immediate aftermath of the shooting would have been a scene of chaos and terror. The stillness of death would have abruptly replaced the sounds of everyday life within the home. The physical space, once a symbol of Cornisha's achievements and a haven for her children, was instantly transformed into a crime scene stained by violence. The arrival of law enforcement and emergency responders would have shattered any remaining semblance of normalcy. The crime scene itself would have been meticulously documented by investigators. Forensic teams would have carefully examined the location of the shooting, the position of Cornisha's body, and any evidence left behind by Shakia, including the weapon used. Bloodstains, shell casings, and any signs of struggle would have been crucial pieces of the puzzle in reconstructing the final moments of Cornisha's life. The house, filled with the remnants of Cornisha's life and the toys and belongings of her children, would have served as a stark backdrop to the brutal reality of her murder. The emotional atmosphere in the immediate aftermath would have been one of profound shock and grief. The realization that Cornisha was gone, the sudden and violent nature of her death, and the knowledge that her young child had witnessed this horror would have sent waves of devastation through her family and friends. The once promising future Cornisha had worked so hard to build was extinguished in an instant, leaving behind a legacy of loss and a stark reminder of the ultimate price of unchecked domestic violence and systemic failures. The murder of Corneisha Butler in her own home was not just a crime, it was a profound violation of safety, a tragic consequence of ignored warnings, and a devastating loss for all who knew and loved her. Following the horrific murder of Corneisha Butler, the wheels of the legal system began to turn with the apprehension of Shakia Perkins. Law enforcement swiftly took Shakia into custody, and she was formally charged with first-degree murder, the most severe homicide offense, reflecting the intentional and malicious nature of the crime. The arrest brought a sense of immediate, albeit somber, relief to Cornisha's loved ones and the wider community, signaling that the person allegedly responsible for this heinous act would face the consequences. The subsequent legal proceedings, while intended to deliver justice for Cornisha, would undoubtedly be a protracted and emotionally draining process. Details regarding specific court appearances, evidence presented, and the defense's arguments are crucial to understanding the trajectory of the case. The prosecution would likely build a case based on the history of abuse, the violation of the restraining order, forensic evidence from the crime scene, and any potential witness testimonies. The defense, on the other hand, might explore various legal strategies. The aim of the legal process is to establish the truth beyond a reasonable doubt and to hold Shakia Perkins accountable for the murder of Corneisha Butler. The outcome of these proceedings would have significant implications, not only for the families involved but also for the broader message sent about the seriousness with which the legal system treats domestic violence and the violation of protective orders. The impact of Cornisha's death on her 4 children and her extended family is immeasurable and will reverberate for years to come. The children have been robbed of their mother's love, guidance, and care in the most brutal and incomprehensible way. The trauma of losing a parent to violence, particularly in their own home and with a young sibling potentially witnessing the event, will have profound and lasting psychological effects. The surviving family members, parents, siblings, and other relatives are left to grapple with immense grief, anger, and the daunting task of raising Cornisha's children in the shadow of this tragedy. The emotional void left by her absence will be a constant reminder of the vibrant life that was so cruelly extinguished. The community's response to Cornisha's murder was one of collective shock, grief, and outrage. The senseless loss of a young mother who had worked hard to build a better life resonated deeply with many. Vigils and memorial services likely took place, providing a space for the community to come together, express their condolences, and remember Cornisha's life. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the ever-present threat of domestic violence within communities and sparked conversations about the need for greater awareness, prevention, and support for victims. There was likely a shared sense of frustration and anger at the systemic failures that seemingly contributed to this preventable death, fueling a desire for change and accountability. In a powerful testament to Cornisha's memory and a commitment to preventing similar tragedies, a foundation was established in her name to support victims of domestic violence. This act of remembrance transforms Cornisha's tragic end into a catalyst for positive change. The foundation likely aims to provide resources, support, and advocacy for individuals experiencing domestic abuse, offering a lifeline to those who are most vulnerable. By raising awareness, providing practical assistance, and potentially advocating for policy changes, the foundation seeks to honor Cornisha's life by working to protect others from the same fate. This enduring legacy of compassion and action ensures that Cornisha's story serves not only as a cautionary tale but also as an inspiration for creating safer communities for everyone. The tragic narrative of Corneisha Butler's life and death serves as a stark and devastating lesson, underscoring the critical importance of recognizing the insidious early warning signs of domestic violence. The abuse Corneisha endured did not begin with a fatal act. It likely started with more subtle forms of control, possessiveness, and jealousy, gradually escalating into property destruction, physical violence, and ultimately, terrifying death threats. The timestamp likely points to a moment in the source material where these initial red flags are discussed. It is imperative that individuals learn to identify these patterns in their own relationships or in the relationships of those around them. Behaviors such as excessive monitoring of communication, unwarranted accusations of infidelity, attempts to isolate a partner from friends and family, and displays of anger that lead to property damage are not normal relationship conflicts. They are potential precursors to more severe forms of abuse. Recognizing these signs early can be a crucial step in seeking help and potentially preventing tragic outcomes. Cornisha's story also starkly highlights the dire need for more robust and accessible support systems for victims of domestic violence. Despite her attempts to seek legal protection, the existing systems proved inadequate. Effective support must extend beyond legal avenues. It includes readily available and confidential resources such as shelters providing safe housing, crisis hotlines offering immediate emotional support and information, counseling services to address the trauma of abuse, and support groups connecting survivors with shared experiences. Furthermore, these systems must be culturally sensitive and accessible to individuals from all backgrounds. Financial assistance to help victims escape abusive situations and establish independent lives is also crucial. The goal is to create a safety net that empowers victims to leave abusive relationships before they escalate to lethal violence, providing them with the emotional, practical, and financial means to rebuild their lives. The failures of the legal system in Cornisha's case cannot be ignored. Her repeated attempts to seek protection through the law were ultimately unsuccessful. This underscores the urgent need for systemic reform in how domestic violence cases are handled. This reform must include a more rigorous assessment of risk posed by abusers, especially those with a documented history of violence. Stricter protocols regarding bail and pretrial release in domestic violence cases are essential to prevent abusers from continuing to harm their victims. Law enforcement agencies need enhanced training to recognize the dynamics of domestic abuse, respond effectively to calls for help, and understand the importance of consistent and thorough investigations. Furthermore, the enforcement of protective orders must be strengthened, with clear consequences for violations. The legal system must shift from a reactive approach to a proactive one, prioritizing the safety and well-being of victims and holding perpetrators accountable. Cornisha's story demands a collective call to action. It is not enough to simply acknowledge the tragedy. We must all become active participants in preventing future violence. This begins with education, learning about the signs of abuse and understanding the dynamics of domestic violence. We must encourage open conversations about these issues, breaking the silence and stigma that often surrounds them. It is crucial to support domestic violence organizations, whether through financial contributions, volunteering time, or raising awareness about their services. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, reaching out to these organizations can provide a lifeline. If you recognize these warning signs in your relationship or someone else's, several protective strategies can help. First, create a safety plan before attempting to leave, the most dangerous period in abusive relationships. This includes securing important documents, establishing a separate financial account, identifying safe locations, and arranging signals with trusted neighbors. Document everything. Save threatening texts, emails, voicemails, and photographs of any injuries or property damage. This evidence strengthens legal cases and helps authorities understand the pattern of abuse. When obtaining restraining orders, request specific protections beyond standard language, such as extended distances, workplace coverage, and explicit consequences for violations. Consider technology safety, check devices for tracking apps, change passwords regularly, and use a separate phone unknown to the abuser for safety communications. Many domestic violence shelters provide temporary phones for this purpose. Most importantly, connect with professional support services rather than facing abuse alone. Domestic violence advocates can navigate complex legal systems, arrange emergency housing, and provide crucial emotional support during the challenging process of establishing safety. We must all speak out against violence in all its forms, challenging societal norms that condone or minimize abuse. By becoming informed, supportive, and vocal, we can collectively work towards creating a society where individuals like Corneisha Butler are not failed by the systems meant to protect them and where everyone can live free from fear and violence.